Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hi everyone, Jean Ha is becoming a regular on the show. For AAPI Heritage Month, I wanted to share conversations with fellow Asian Americans about their experience growing up in the U.S. Jean was kind enough to share his childhood memories growing up in South Bend, Indiana. We also have some big news to share regarding appearing at a comic convention together later this year. Keep listening to find out more. Jean Ha is an award-winning artist who worked on Wonder Woman Historia, The Amazons with writer Kelly Sue DeConnick, as well as many other Marvel and DC superheroes. I am so honored to share in these conversations with guests like Jean and hope you enjoy listening. If you do, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Jean. Welcome back.
Hi, Sifu Mimi. It's good to be back.
So, oh my goodness. You don't actually have to call me Sifu Mimi, by the way.
but it's fun to start off the conversation that way. So
love it. I am thrilled because you and I have been decided we're going to make up for lost time and have more frequent conversations, and we might as well record them for the world to listen to and, benefit from all of our banter and enjoyment of stories and all of these things. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, until we actually get to hang out in person. This is still as much fun as we can have. So Exactly. I think we've all embraced Zoom to a certain extent and FaceTime because it just kind of allows us to do the hangout thing. But last time we spoke, and it was on air, I suggested that we do hang out in person, and I kind of threw out there this, Wonder Woman Historia reunion that I have no business being a part of, but somehow convinced myself that I should ringlead this. And we actually reached out to Kelly Sue, and she loved the idea. And so Looks like it's going to happen, Yeah. So Rose City Comic Con this year, it's going to be the get together of, I think, Kelly Sue DeConnick and her artists on Historia, which includes me, Phil Jimenez, and Nicholas Scott.
Yes.
And then it's going to be a big, giant Wonder Woman event, also with Sifu Mimi.
Yeah, because somehow I've inserted myself into this wonderful lineup of humans that, like I said, I have no business being a part of, but excited to be.
You instigated it, so
I did. I take credit for being an instigator, 100%. But that's just me being selfish, wanting to hang out with all the cool humans. So yes, absolutely. And you had said you'd never met in person, and I thought, what? We need to make this happen ASAP. So yeah. It's very, very exciting stuff. So, we're going to all be in Rose City Comic Con together. A few short months.
Yeah. Okay. I just closed my web browser because it's saying your audio quality will improve if I close other things. That's the only thing open. So hopefully this will sound even better now. Okay.
Awesome. Just love the internet's talking to us. Last time you and I talked a lot about AI and, your computer's letting you know that things will improve. So I love that. But Rose City Comic Con I've actually been to once. And that is where I was so grateful to kind of start a lot of the conversations that's been ongoing with all the PDX community in particular. So that was just kind of a lot of fun. And that happened actually right before COVID. So it's been really cool to get to know the community there and to be able to actually call a lot of those amazing creators friends. But it's going to be so much fun to go back. And now you're going. I mean, it was kind of a kismet, right? Because I kind of pitched it online last time when we were talking. And then what was it, 2 days later, you're like, by the way, it looks like I am headed there. I mean, that's incredible. So you're going to be there also promoting and signing and helping the
Hero Initiative, which is a charity that helps out especially older comics creators who are mostly freelancers and don't have usually great retirement plans or health benefits or anything like that. So so I used to say we younger creators, but now my cohort of people my age are starting to be the ones who are also getting the help more and more often. So yeah, as long as all of us of all ages trying to help out those who need it. So
100%. And how long have you been involved with that?
Oh, man, over 10 years. I kind of feel it almost feels like I've been doing it forever.
Yeah,
but
10 years is a good chunk of time.
Yeah, and they used to be called. They had the most confusing name in the world. So it's a comics charity helping writers, mostly writers and artists.
Yeah.
And they used to be called Actor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that needed to go. So I'm so glad.
Was it just an acronym for something
Yeah, it was a very complicated acronym, but then it sounded like it was a movie and TV thing instead of being a comics thing.
100%. So it's very clear now, but that's fantastic. And so I loved the fact that 2 days later, you're like, guess what? I'm actually going to be there anyway. I'm like, oh, that's it. We're totally making this happen. And the really cool thing was how enthused Kelly Sue was about the idea. And we're pitching all sorts of fun things, not just the panel, but, we want to see like cosplayers out there, just all sorts of fun stuff. So those of you who are in the PDX area, Pacific Northwest, come out to Rose City. It's September 25, something like that, 26. We don't have all the details yet, but stay tuned because it'll be historic and epic.
Yeah. And just generally, if you are a fan of Wonder Woman or Kelly Sue or any of us, it is worth making a special trip out there. So.
Absolutely. I mean, having you all in the same place is kind of a treat. So I'm really excited about it anyway. And I'm glad I'm an instigator because it's going to be a lot of fun, selfishly, just for us, regardless. So yes. But I wanted to talk to you again, one, because I adore you and I love having conversations with you. And last time I realized how terribly long it had been, but also because we are amidst celebrating AAPI Heritage Month. And I really love hearing a little bit more about other AAPI stories. Like, what was your experience like growing up? And, what does that mean? And I'll straight up admit, growing up, I didn't really pay attention to AAPI heritage. It wasn't like very profound here in Florida. It wasn't really a big deal. And kind of as a youth anyway, I shied away from anything that was too, hey, you're Asian, like too much emphasis on that. But like, where did you grow up? And tell me a little bit about like your parents' story as well. And, kind of that whole dynamic and being Asian American.
Yeah. Well, let me say, okay, I'm just going to mention that for a while, I did an interview with Korean magazine, a Korean American magazine. And they had I remember one article that really struck me of like, oh, my experience is so different than a lot of other people's. And they had an article talking about it. And you remember growing up and how almost all of your friends were also Asian American. And it's kind of like, I never got to have that experience.
Me neither.
But it's made out of, comes out from Los Angeles. And it was kind of like, I can't imagine like that being the case. But I always had especially Korean American and Asian American friends growing up in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay.
It was the Korean American parents were mostly either medical doctors or professors at Notre Dame University, a little bit of other jobs and stuff like that. But I mean, that's who most of our dads were. So we were my assumption was like every Korean American kid is the son of a doctor or a professor. And there were no Korean American, no Korean American restaurants. We went to Chicago to buy Asian groceries, things like that. And it's just like, the closest thing we had to kind of a Korean American community institution was church Sunday school. Like there was a Methodist Korean service, and that's about it.
Okay. I hear that a lot, that church is like kind of that community area where a lot of Asian Americans, especially immigrant families, kind of gravitate towards to kind of find that comfort. How far was it to the grocery store, by the way, to go in for your Asian groceries?
Oh, about a 2-hour drive.
Few hours. So, wow. Did you guys bring big like coolers in the car so that you could?
Oh yeah. And it was back when the Korean American neighborhood was a really rough part of Chicago and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And it was not there were not glossy grocery stores and stuff like that. Everything was kind of dusty, and now we have there was nothing like H Mart back then, at least for me.
Of course. And so, kind of thinking about like that, those childhood memories. And like you said, as you know, I think we're all in the same age range here. As we've grown up, it's like, oh, wait, that was a while ago. Like I really have to kind of dig deep to kind of dust off the cobwebs and go, wait, did this happen? Or how did this happen exactly? And, you know, was I the only Asian in school? I'm like, you know what? Growing up, I went to private school actually for the first 5 years or 6 years of my life. And then I went to public school. So I had kind of the experience of both. And there was really only like 2 or 3 Asians in our classes. And in Orlando, Florida, it was pretty not very diverse, rather, you know. And so was it similar for you, like school wise? Did you kind of feel like you fit in? What was the experience for you as a child? Because looking back, there's a lot of things I realized, but as a child, I felt kind of differently than how I reflect on it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because our parents hung out together, I always knew other Asian American, especially Korean American kids, but it was pretty unusual to ever have, I'm trying to remember if I ever had like another Asian American kid in a class with me, and it doesn't really ring a bell at all.
Yeah.
So, there was usually like 1 year older. Oh, wait a minute. Orchestra class. Yeah, orchestra. Then that's where the other Asian American kids and me all hung out and stuff like that once in a while, because it was multi-grade, and therefore you didn't have to be the same age. And like the 1 or 2 other kids in my class didn't have to be in the same homeroom class to actually hang out with me and stuff like that. So
yeah. What did you play?
Cello.
Oh.
But I was not very dedicated to it. There's a lot of things in my life where it turned out I was talented at it, but I didn't work very hard at it. Mm-hmm. And I could have probably done it if I just focused a little more, or figure out a way to make it if it looked like an interesting future to me. So like, I mean, if you look at my the way I draw buildings and stuff like that, I realize now, if someone had presented to me the idea of being a structural engineer, I probably would have really enjoyed it and paid a little more attention during things like physics class and calculus class. But I didn't.
Yeah. Okay. So for you, in terms of learning, for you, there needed to be that connect the dots of like how this could be practical for real life. And that sparks your interest is what I mean.
And it's one of those things where like, I think that's the thing where like, if a kid is, whatever a kid's interest usually, if they really get into it really deeply, at a certain point, they'll realize a lot of, almost everything you study can be kind of feed into it and make you better at it.
Yeah.
Like if you're into music, I mean, being into English class and poetry, and I'm going to say this about every creative field, learning business skills and then math skills and all that type of stuff turns out to be really valuable to it. And it's hard for me to think of a class I took at any time in my life that I haven't been able to use in comics one way or another, where it hasn't enriched my viewpoint and how I tell comic stories, or actually I've used it in a practical way to just like make my business, my career work better or stuff like that. So,
I mean, are you talking about like upper level, like education? Or are you talking like elementary even?
I mean, every level. I mean, elementary school, or European history, or African history, or calculus. Actually, calculus is the one. I use trigonometry, but I have not used calculus yet. Pre-calc. I haven't used pre-calc. I didn't take calculus inside my comics yet.
I really love that, your respect for bringing in that drawing those lines so nicely and stuff, because I have to admit, I'm a bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to I highly believe in education. Don't get me wrong. I think the issue I have is with the school system, right? And how education is presented and taught, and how it's very much one mold. Like this is the way for everybody that has to learn a certain way, and we all learn so differently. And I can definitively say there are a lot of classes I don't think brought any value to my career, but I am so amazed, and I actually respect the fact that you're able to like draw those lines and have that like connectivity, So being in class and being the only Asian American. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, but just let me throw this in. You are so intellectually curious and just energetically kind of, your brain is busy. It's just kind of like it expands and looks into things. It's hard for me to imagine any class you in a sense didn't use. I mean, like, I'm going to say, like, I mean, for me, trigonometry is a lot about drawing and stuff like that. But for you, trigonometry essentially applies, I mean, frankly, to figuring out like how the angles you're holding your arm when you're trying to reach, do a strike or stuff like that, or balance your body or stuff like that.
I feel like I did not draw the lines well to connect those two dots, right? And so I don't believe at the time that I had learned it, there was any connectivity to doing it. And therefore, because I couldn't see that, I don't think I took the value in it. I took it more as like, I'm going to memorize this, or I'm going to do this thing and then move on with my life and take this test or whatever, right? Looking back, of course, if you think about, like for me, the process of school, I think more so than what I learned in the classroom was how to be organized, get through, the school days, and how to manage my time, how to critically think of, I need to be done with this as soon as possible so that I can go do the things that I enjoy. And so for me, I think education is super important. Obviously, I'm literally like writing a bill for education right now. So I obviously think it's the number one solution for so many things, including anti-Asian hate, which we'll of course talk about. But I feel like if I had more lives, and I've said this before, a lot of my listeners know, I had more time, I would probably create a different institute of learning to which 8 hours of the day isn't dedicated to a child sitting in a chair, listening to someone just like go through this thing, and for people to have to take standardized tests and things like that. I don't find that to be education. I find that to be the problem. I agree with you. The subject matter can be important, but for me, like the process of college, for me, like the process of going through college and what I learned along the way is far more important than the class itself. Like, yes, the business classes I took and things like that, there are little things I pull here and there, but I think that could have also been done in like a 3-week seminar, like a lot of it, right? I feel like a lot of it is superfluous, if that makes sense, but that's also just like personal to me. Like, I don't like wasting time. And I feel like a lot of the classes that we were made and required to do, didn't like, wasn't the best use of time. I guess that's the way to put it. And I think it's also not fair, right? Because teachers, they just have to teach what they're told to teach and how they're told to teach. And so, but I love your enthusiasm for school. So did you love school then?
No, at the time looking back, I can see how everything was useful. At the time, just like almost every other student out there, I saw it as an obstacle course I had to get through to get to the stuff I wanted to do.
I thought you were some anomaly that was just like, wow, I can see all the things. And you have an appreciation then for it as you reflect back. That makes a lot of sense for me. So as one of the only Asian American kids while you were in your class, except for orchestra, did you ever take note of that, or was it pointed out to you? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Oh, I mean, like in grade school, that's where you got the Chinese, Japanese, the kids doing all the, making fun of you and stuff like that, just because anyone different, they're going to, make fun of them. And that happened a little bit. But as I got older, there's a term I use where I got into a situation where Asian was treated as honorary provisional white person. Not quite a white person, but we're going to, for purposes of how we're going to treat you, we're going to treat you kind of like a white person unless you make us withdraw your membership.
I see. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Like give me an example of like when that conclusion came to you, or when that was really prevalent. I
mean, it's part of it is just like looking at how there weren't a lot of as many Latino kids in South Bend, Indiana at the time as there are now. There were. The big divide was black versus white. And essentially, a lot of American society comes down to how individuals or groups of people categorize, want to divide people either into, we're going to treat them as a black person, or we're going to treat them as a white person, somebody with privilege or somebody to be feared and oppressed. And so for most purposes, inside growing up in South Bend, I got classified as kind of a white kid. So the black kids kind of treated me like a white kid. The white kids pretty much treated me like a white kid. And part of this also was just, and again, I had this, I was very lucky that I had an older brother who was incredibly smart, good at football and popular with girls, and would beat up kids who try to beat it. So just there's a force field I didn't always see, but some of the bullies knew. Oh, you mess with Gene Ha after school, his older brother's going to come along and beat you up. So don't beat up Gene Ha.
That is a nice insurance to have. It's nice to have a big brother that looked out for you that way. But unfortunate for him too, right? Like that he had to be the protector, that we're even in an environment where that hostility exists and everything. And like you looking back again, just the way you look back at school and have this appreciation of that, it's kind of like, are you grateful that you were shielded from some of those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this is not to say that like everyone on the football, my brother was very much into the football team culture. Yeah. And I had friends who were nerds who were the ones the football team went after, informally after school and stuff like that. Like they would chase them and they'd be running in fear for their lives and stuff like that. Oh. Or fear of atomic wedgies or stuff like that. So,
right. Which is so not okay. It's so horrible. And for me, like, I feel the same way, right? I had a similar experience where I was one of the few or one of the only in the school. And because I wasn't, like you said, you're either treated Black or you're treated white. Like there was this kind of in between, but there was definitely times where the Asian side of things, people would either like make fun of you or ask you silly questions. And looking back, I wasn't this like child that cried at home because I was being picked on or anything like that. Like I was very fortunate to be very ignorant of a lot of the things happening. Whereas I think a lot of the kids now, because if they hear it there, then they get reinforcement from what they see online. And there's just so much more input, right? I think that the way it affects kids now might be a bit different. And we also had a higher tolerance, I think, for certain things that are definitely not accepted now, right? Like words and everything, right? That the acceptance level and like we've come a long way, and this is the education is important part. But like, I definitively know that I felt I would rather be treated like I was white or try to assimilate, try to blend in, try to not necessarily, like I said, with AAPI Heritage, I wasn't like, hey, everyone, it's AAPI Heritage Month. Let's talk about culture and Asian traditions. And the only thing I ever celebrated and like let people know about was Chinese New Year, because I didn't have to go to school that day because I was off doing shows all day with the Kung Fu School. So that was the only thing I was really proud of, because I was like, haha. You have to be in school and I don't. But really, I realized shamefully to myself now, I shied away from so much of embracing that, right? And I don't know, was it the same for you, or did you just kind of feel like, well, I'm categorized here? It's like that model minority myth, right? Like, okay, you're the docile Asian, and so you're not quote unquote one of them, or you're not threatening.
Well, yeah, people would have been thrilled if I knew martial arts, but I didn't. But then I fit into the nerdy, good at academics Asian thing, which I wasn't smarter than, a lot of the other kids. But just because it was an easy role to fit into, it was like, well, if they're going to treat me like I'm things, I will try to study a little harder. But like I did horrible in chemistry class, mediocre in physics class and things like that. And it's turned out, like I said, later I figured out how much I love these things. But at the time, it was kind of like a struggle. But yeah, teachers would just kind of like expect, would you ask me why I'm not doing better? And in a way that was kind of had the subtext of, you're Asian, you're supposed to be like the other Asian kids and do really well at these classes.
Yeah. I mean, these stereotypes exist for a reason. I mean, it isn't untrue that there are a lot of Asian Americans that are studious, et cetera, but it also doesn't mean that every Asian American is the same. And it was kind of annoying to me because I totally fit the stereotype. I did Kung Fu. I had my father's a Kung Fu master. And like, it was just, I couldn't have been more of like that walking stereotype. And although I wasn't good at math, I didn't do that great in school in terms of, like you said, I didn't feel like I was the top of my class because I was a smart Asian kid. It's because I worked really hard at always wanting to like achieve, right? So it was always kind of ingrained in me, probably from my martial arts study, if I were to reflect, of just always trying to make sure that whatever I did the best at, whatever that meant. And in this case, it means trying to get an A. Anything other than that is unacceptable. But when would you say in your years that you looked back and you started to really embrace, being Korean American, or when did it kind of like occur to you that you didn't have to be white or Black?
I mean, like there's a weird thing, like both in South Bend, and I went to college in Detroit, which at the time was even rougher than it is now. It was the murder capital of the United States when I was in college. But there weren't relatively a lot of Asians in either place. So there was a little bit of confusion of, for people, especially who hadn't met a lot of Asians, they didn't know where to categorize you. So in a way, I was also, in addition to being kind of provisionally white, I was also treated as provisionally black sometimes by black kids, where they're like, I mean, they would try to, I'm a horrible dancer to this day, but some of the black kids would try to keep me, I had a lot of black friends and stuff like that. And they would try to teach me like cool dance moves or just chat about this and that.
I love it.
Yeah. They were totally, I mean, everyone was so nice to me relatively, I mean, not everyone, but I had so many nice friends in high school of all races and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But then you could also see the differences too. I should mention also my older brother could dance.
Oh,
I could not. But I
remember one time there's physical, athletic, and did that. That was his realm. And you're like the genius artist.
Well, he was good at social stuff. He was good at academics, and he was good at sports. So he kind of had it all. And he his features. He passed away quite a while ago, but his features were kind of like a pretty young Elvis, but Korean.
Okay.
He had a much stronger brow line than me, sharper jaw, straighter nose. I mean, I remember when I visited him in college once, he had an Elvis calendar up, and it was kind of like, yeah, it is kind of weird how much you look like him without trying to look like him.
Aww. Amazing.
But yeah, so he would guide me along. I'm somewhere on the Asperger spectrum, and I didn't even hear the term when I was in high school, by the time I was in high school, graduated high school, but he kind of recognized I had some social awkwardness, and he would try to teach me social skills and explain things, which I should mention, he taught me to be flirty.
Oh.
So to this day.
What was that lesson like?
It was just like, it's just, it's when you're talking to a girl, it's just nice to say, like your hair looks nice, this or that. Just give a nice compliment like that, just as a normal, to your friends. And I'm still a little bit like that today, where I'll just like compliment women or something like that. Not in physical attributes, but just like, oh, you're dressed nicely today, or your hair looks nice today, or oh, your makeup is perfect and flawless today, or something like that. And it can sound like I'm flirting with everybody, including men sometimes.
Yeah.
But again, that's just how my brother tried to teach me social skills, and partially because he was trying to help me get a date.
Oh.
Without necessarily saying it sometimes.
Did it work?
I was not good boyfriend material until quite a few years later. And in a way, my current wife is the one who really kind of trained me up. I was like,
well, I was going to say, you have a lovely wife now. So clearly, like, the lessons paid off because,
Oh, yeah. But she kind of. Yeah, she was one of those people who in dating is willing to take on a fixer-upper.
I think that you're not giving yourself enough credit. And
I was awkward. I was still awkward when I met her.
Oh my gosh. Well, clearly, your brother did give you the foundation and the basics, as we would say in Kung Fu training, and took you under his wing and gave you all the basics that you have then. And I'm sure that it definitely helped for sure with your current situation. Oh, yeah. But I was just curious if you were like trying to get a prom date or something, and he was like trying to, how that worked.
Yeah, like I went to prom, but I think there's also the thing, I didn't quite catch the context of the unofficial stuff of like, then my date expected to like go partying after the prom, and I didn't quite get the unofficial stuff, and she was a little angry about that. So, the unspoken stuff is stuff I didn't catch.
Yeah. And so, if you don't mind sharing, because so many people now are so much more open talking about some of the social issues like Asperger's and having a spectrum of things that are like uncomfortable. But back then, we also didn't really know what a lot of that was, right? Like there was no diagnosis, so to speak. So it wasn't a matter. And so from a teaching aspect, all of my staff, like we have a lot of children on the autism spectrum. We have a lot of kids with special needs. My sister has had special needs, cerebral palsy her whole life. So it's something very, for me, that's been familiar because it's been in my home, it's been around, but like socially speaking, it's been we're finally getting to a place where there's so much, not just acceptance, but that we're willing to have these conversations, and it's not something you feel like you have to hide and shy away from.
No.
But was there like a lot of realization through, it sounds like your brother played such a huge role in bringing out that social, less of that social awkwardness, and like, how did that play into not just being Asian American, but then also having something that you kind of had introspectively that you had to work through?
Yeah, I mean, well, like there's an interesting little kind of conjunction in my life between, okay, so I'm a big nerd, and there's a lot of nerds a lot of people on the spectrum who end up inside of nerdy pop culture. Mm-hmm. And then it's especially I'm not a manga anime person, especially, but because the emotions are so graphically displayed and so obvious and big inside of anime and manga, it's very friendly for Asperger's people and kind of helps transition them into understanding society. That's adjacent to what I do. So I have a lot of friends who are into anime, into manga, and some of them are on the Asperger scale. A lot of people on the spectrum like me end up loving superheroes.
Okay.
Which is how I did it. And then it just clear roles, a way to be a good guy, things like that. And just, and then, but the weird biggest thing that made a difference in me being able to intellectually understand all the social skills that I don't intuitively understand was a book by Deborah Tannen, who's a doctorate in like communication sociology and communication. And she was talking about, I read a book of hers about differences in communication styles between women typically and men typically. Mm-hmm. And women typically have more unspoken social cues, and men often will miss women's unspoken social cues.
No
or
kidding.
Subtext. Yeah. So like one of the examples she gives is a husband and wife driving down the highway, and the wife asks, "Hey, do you need to need a restroom break?" And the husband's saying, "No." And then they go past the rest stop, and the wife says, "Why didn't you stop?" And it's like, "I don't need a restroom break." And it's like, I asked you, and the unspoken thing is, I asked you because I was trying to be considerate. I was hoping you'd be considerate.
Right.
Yeah. And then so like, oh, this is how unspoken social cues work, or subtext social cues work. And the more I thought about it, I was able to look for them actively because I just don't naturally pick them up.
I see.
Which means I will oftentimes pick up social cues that a lot of guys don't pick up because they're not bothering to look, not because they lack.
Right. I was going to say, you're so intuitive. Like to me,
not
it feels like, well, it feels that way because you're so attentive and very complimentary, as you say. I always tell my husband, like, "Oh, Jean is so nice." Like even in your emails, you're so nice, and not just nice, but just genuine. Everything comes off very genuine, and so I don't think people realize like all of it. I don't think you have to have any sort of awkwardness or be on the spectrum to have issues with social cues. I think that that's kind of a human thing, but also, like you said, there is definitely a specific way of like how you process and catch and learn things. And this is why, as an instructor, like we want to make sure we're always using like the best possible communication skills, the best possible cueing. And I mean, that goes across to anyone who's out there learning, right? It's not just somebody who's on the spectrum or anything like that. I find that applies pretty much to humans in general. Like we are not great listeners. And that's like one of the things that's been great about this for me is it's allowed me to just be a better listener. I'm still working on it, but it's been a great journey, definitely for sure. But so in college, you said you still had you were still like one of the only Asians. So back to kind of the Asian American thing, like, was there a time at that time, did you kind of embrace your culture or still not yet?
Not yet, because there weren't a huge amount of other Asians. There are some, but not a huge amount of other Asian students. And frankly, most of them were a lot cooler than me and better at like going to parties or dating or dancing or stuff like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of like other Asian students at my art school who were as awkward as me. And I'm sure there were, but I didn't quite connect with them. And I just kind of ended up in a broader comic nerd community, which was mostly black and white.
And so before we jump back into the Asian American like experience, like, do you celebrate the fact that when you look at the 80s, it was a very much, oh, the sports guy is the cool guy, and everyone else is a nerd who reads comics and plays D&D or whatever. Whereas like kind of in this era, it's so cool to like comic books, and it's so cool to be in the know about all the characters and have the background canon on, Superman and Batman. Like it's a totally different thing. Like it's kind of cool now to be the geek. Like is that a celebration for you, or do you go, man, why couldn't it have been when I was a kid?
I mean, I guess the thing is like the internet has been a huge change for me, and just being able to kind of, I mean, I knew the prince, like, okay, I'm going to get this. Vincent Chin. Vincent Chin was killed in Detroit. Yeah. So he's a guy living in the Detroit area, and he got into an argument with some guys outside of I think it was a fast food restaurant, and he just got beaten to death by them, and it was kind of a racist killing. But the judge who judged the two murderers said, well, it's kind of excusable. I'm going to he gave them a super light sentence, and this kind of became a galvanizing moment for the Asian American community across the nation. Yeah. And that's where I went to college. Oh. But but most of the people I met, they seemed a little, again, it seemed like I got lucky, and I kind of got provisionally treated as kind of black and kind of white. I remember a lot of people kind of like, oh God. I mean, there's a lot of like just me going down the street, just people saying, hey, Bruce Lee, that type of thing. Right. Which, not great, but if you're going to be compared to anyone, that's not the worst. So.
You know what? And it's true. It's true. I think there's this like balance that we need to find within ourselves, that it's like, yes, we don't want people to stereotype and just call. But like you said, like there are worse things to be called for sure than Bruce Lee. 100%. There are worse things. So it could be taken as a compliment, but the problem is context, right? So were they saying it because they were like, wow, you look so strong and fit and you move like really smooth, or were they just trying to be, I think context is key. So the words,
every Asian guy was called Bruce Lee. Yes. That was all
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember actually explaining to this guy who randomly yelled on the street that it was Bruce Lee. Like, Bruce Lee was a great guy, but I mean, you don't want me to call you someone like, John Coltrane or Martin Luther King, or when you're just walking down the street, because it's just kind of limiting.
Exactly. And you had that conversation?
Oh, yeah.
How did that go?
Oh, actually, the guys were really nice about it. It was a gas station near my art school. And some guys called me Bruce Lee, and it was like, I kind of laughed about it. I like walked over and we just started chatting. I said, like, you shouldn't just call random Asian guys Bruce Lee. And it's like, really? Why? And it's like, I kind of gave example. They were black, and I explained, like, I mean, as cool as like these, I gave names some black celebrities from the time. It's like, you wouldn't want me to, randomly like yell at you or something like, hey, Prince or something like that.
And they were like, oh. Well.
Yeah, it made total sense to them.
Yeah, you see, and this is where like the delivery, the context of what you're saying, like, because I mean, nowadays you hope that could be a conversation, right? And that would be fine. But then, now that Florida is an open carry state, I'm like, I don't know. I just kind of don't want to get shot randomly either from anybody that might be carrying a gun. So like, it's just weird. Like, I really believe in the power of conversation. And I think you may have changed like two people that you just randomly met at a gas station. And that's like phenomenal, actually.
Yeah. I'll say there is definitely the context of the tone of voice that somebody yells something like that. Where it's like, if they'd said it with a slightly different tone of voice, I would have been like, I need to get out of here.
Okay. That's true. But still, it's still bold and brave to engage in a conversation that could be uncomfortable. Because I think that's what one of the things is frustrating, is like we as humans tend to move away from anything that could be uncomfortable, even if it means growth, or even if it means that something at the end of that could be positive. Like, discomfort is not something we like run straight into. But it seems like you do.
Yeah. On a related topic, I was at a comic convention in Mexico City where like 99% of the people are completely delightful. But there was a funny thing that happened as I left the baggage area with my local translator, artist alley manager, guy who was taking me to the hotel. A guy ran up and said, "Hey, are you Jim Lee?" And it's like, "No, I'm Gene Ha." And he's like, "You sure?" And it's like, "Yeah."
Are you sure?
Yeah. And that was fine. And apparently, like when a really big name like Jim Lee or Frank Miller comes to the convention there, there are people who will hang out with like actual memorabilia by those people, hoping to get it signed easily without having to pay a fee or wait in a 2-hour line to actually meet these people.
Yes.
But then the funny thing is at the convention, and that was a kid. He was like 25, which by my age is a kid.
Is a kid, right?
Yeah. But at the convention, and it happened one more time, but this time it was like a guy probably in his 50s, beard, white hair and stuff like that. And he came up with some Jim Lee comments and said, "You're Jim Lee." And I'm sitting at a table with a sign on it where I put up, which says Gene Ha. And then I had a sign behind me that said Gene Ha. And I said, "No." And I pointed at the sign and said, "I'm Gene Ha." And he was like, "You're sure?" "Yeah, I'm Gene Ha." And I pointed at both signs. And he was like suspicious. Then he left and he came back, asked again. And it's kind of like, "Nope, still Gene Ha." And then he came back. When he came back a third time, he was carrying a big hardcover Jim Lee art book. And he said, "This is your work, isn't it?" And it's like, "Nope, that's Jim Lee's work. I'm Gene Ha." And finally, the fourth time I interacted with him was he finally walked by with his...
This guy's persistent.
He didn't do it a fourth time, but the fourth time I interacted with him, he walked by with his teenage kid. And then I oftentimes at convention, if I'm not doing anything else, I'll offer free drawings to kids. And then I said, I offered the kid, "Can I make a drawing for you?" And I did. And then I signed to Gene Ha. And I think by that point, he finally accepted, maybe he's not Jim Lee. Or if he did, at least I got a free drawing out of it.
I don't know. At that point, I would be like, "Yep, I'm Jim Lee. Let me sign your book."
Oh, no. See, I realized later, the slightly mean but funny way I should have done it is not saying, "Yes, I'm Jim Lee and I'll sign your book." It's to say, "Yes, I'm Jim Lee, but you've met me outside the line, which is not allowed. So I'm never going to talk to you again."
I mean, I guess if Jim Lee wasn't actually there and knew that you were impersonating him, it wouldn't have been, it's kind of uncool to do it, but I think he would have found it funny, no?
Oh, well, I mean, he was there, but
what I'm saying is he might have found it funny if you just been like, by the way, I just signed a book as you because this guy was insisting that another Asian guy obviously had to be Jim Lee.
I have offered people, I'm not that person, but I am totally willing to forge their signature if you want, or, I'll sign their book with my name if you want.
Yes. Any takers on that?
Not so far. I mean, actually, a little bit. I mean, if we both kind of worked on a character like Batman or something like that, and someone just wants to get every Batman creator on a book, then I'll sign.
I see. Yeah. But no, you weren't impersonating anyone.
No, I don't try to impersonate. No.
I know you would never do it, but I mean, that guy was being pretty persistent, I would say at that point. I think he kind of was asking for it. I don't know. I think it can be frustrating, but you clearly have such a great disposition that you were probably smiling every time he came around, even though they don't read, even though there's a sign. And
it was just so ridiculous.
It is. I mean, I guess I kind of get it because the Wallam Temple in Orlando, Florida, especially in 1980, is just this big Asian building in the middle of nowhere. And now it's in the middle of a metro city that's like huge. But like at the time, it was like a 2-lane road with just a forest, right? So literally. And but the problem is even till this day, like last year, people would come in and think it's a restaurant. Even though it says Wallam Kung Fu. So people still either don't know what Kung Fu is or they just can't read. And I don't know which one's worse. That they can drive, but they can't read, or that they're still thinking, they're just stereotyping like, oh, this Asian building is obviously a restaurant, So sometimes I'm like, sorry, we're all out of egg rolls. And, we would just start coming up with new things to tell people when they would come into the Kung Fu school because it was just so exhaustive. But it's fascinating to me, though, that people don't read and that there's just these assumptions all the time, But luckily, they've all been harmless, right? Yeah. Because we're actually in an era where it hasn't been harmless, right? In the last few years, especially, we've seen, the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes, seen some pretty disturbing and like just horrific footage of things because the social media enables us to be able to see that. And did you have any experiences through the pandemic, or were you kind of in close range to anything? And also, what was that like for you to kind of witness, knowing like, wow, this is happening?
Yeah, it didn't so much happen to me, but I mean, it happened to people I knew, like comics, especially like Asian comics creators and female Asian comics creators I know in the New York City area, where like and especially, and the relatives and stuff like that, just found it a nightmare getting on the subway train. Man, my phone just keeps on blinking,
so
beeping,
popular.
beeping. It's just, well, I organize my life with Google Calendar to remind me of everything. And then I do multiple reminders that something is coming up.
Yeah.
So I like do it like 15 hours before, usually 5 hours before, 2 hours before, 1 hour before, 30 minutes before. And then it just beep, 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 beep. So
that way you don't miss anything.
Until I do. Oh, God. C2E2. I had a lot of sketch commissions and a lot of chaos happening before the convention. Yeah. And I missed the one panel I was supposed to do until the last 5 minutes, which gave me just enough time to show up and apologize.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
yeah, I felt so bad.
Oh, that's rough. That's definitely rough. Yeah. But at least you made it.
Yeah. And I made the offer, like, if you have anything you want to ask me, related to comics and art and stuff like that, just come to my table in Artist Alley and I'll answer those questions for you.
Yeah. Well, you're so gracious. And I actually got to sit in at one of your talks, one of your panels, or I don't know what they're called when it's just you talking. It's just
oh yeah,
at San Diego. It's not a panel, right? Because it's like
what's a panel? It's called
still
a panel,
called a panel.
Yeah, okay. Just because every event is called a panel, usually at a comic convention.
Every event's a panel. Okay, yeah, you got to educate me on this. I've only been to a few cons, and ironically, I've always been on a panel, except for RCCC. The last time that was like my first one. I'm like, I am a guest. I get to just walk around. This is fantastic. So yeah, But yeah, I got to sit in, and the lights went out, and you were drawing, and you were teaching and explaining things that I did not understand. Yeah. I'll be honest, but it was really cool to get to watch you and to spend time with you in San Diego. So you're like one of the few people that, because if I met you pre-pandemic, we got to meet in person and then like continue the conversations by Zoom. So that's always nice. But kind of back to the last couple of years. So one of the things I've been working on is that education-based solution to prevent anti-Asian hate crimes, right? So several hours of my day, every day for the last few years has been kind of dedicated to working on this legislation, which is AAPI history inclusion. And what's kind of exciting is Illinois is like the first state that did it. And we're kind of trying to follow suit and get that done. And it's been very frustrating and very tiring, but I do find it to be kind of a worthy pursuit. Like that's my way of, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And I know that you just mentioned you had friends and people that you knew that things were happening directly to, but like what was your kind of like my coping mechanism was just to make myself crazy and take all my time and go into action mode and do something bold, like, oh, now I'm going to be like going and talking to legislators and write a bill, which is not very normal, I think. But what was your coping mechanism?
I so admire that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I mean, it's very much what it's the thing where, like, if I don't have a direct connection to something, but my friends do, and I really care about what my friends do, and they're doing something awesome, I try to be the person who's out there cheerleading for what they do and supporting what they do. I describe it as like when people are fighting against racism or misogyny or stuff like that. Like, I don't face a huge amount of sexism in my life that causes problems, and I don't face as much racism as a lot of my friends do. But if I'm not on the front lines, and I know my friends are, I'm going to be their backup. I'm going to do everything I can to kind of supply them with everything they need on the front line, and to also point out, I'm not on the front line, but my friend is, and they're fighting the good fight, and all of us need to back them up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's so important because people, I feel, don't realize how important those supporting roles are. So like my husband does not go to Tallahassee with me. He does not get on the Make Us Visible Florida, group meetings and all of that. But like, I would not be able to do any of what I'm doing without like that support system. And with even, like you said, all the cheerleaders, all the friends that like repost things for me and just help advocate, like all of that is encouragement and also just like support that I think people don't even realize how how much it keeps one going to do those things.
Yeah.
So it's super important to be that cheerleader and to be supportive and to also be brave enough to even say like, no, I stand by this, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I agree with you, but I don't want to get involved, or I don't want to, be vocal. And I think that's okay. Everybody's got their personal opinion, but I feel like there are definitive lines where it comes to something like this, like anti-Asian hate crimes, or when it comes to racism, I feel like, no, it is our responsibility to speak out, because you talked about being bullied, or, your brother who stood up for you. Right. And so it's like, if you don't stand up for them, you might as well be the bully, right? Yourself.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. And
there's a thing where like in bullying, or even inside of like horrific government torture or something like that, the point of it is not necessarily even the immediate pain. It's doing it in a way that shows I can do this to you and I can do worse, and no one's going to stop me, and no one cares about you. And that's one of the big. So if you're the person, if you see some type of bullying and try to stop it, partially, or just stop the process of it so the person has a chance to get away and get their dignity back, or something like that. It's like that thing of like, if you see someone being threatened on a subway train or facing racist taunts, it's not that you're supposed to go up to the bully and scream at them and punch them in the face. You're supposed to not focus on the bully. You're supposed to focus on the person being bullied and letting them know, I hear you, I respect you, I'm going to try to break this process. I'm going to say, are you okay? Focus on them.
Yeah.
And let them know you have backup and you're not alone.
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, that is one of the interventions that kind of they teach when it comes to like, if you see this happening, and obviously you can't always just put yourself into danger, but there's definitely ways that you can be supportive. And I think that's so overlooked, actually. And the credit of these supporting roles are also overlooked, because you're not like you said, on the front lines, so to speak, but it's super, super important. So do you do anything in particular during AAPI Heritage? Do you get called, I guess, to give speeches or anything like that? Or is there any kind of celebratory thing that you do now as you've kind of embraced like, your heritage? And is there anything you do to kind of celebrate?
Not really. I got invited to a library panel to talk about like anti-Asian racism locally, and I just kind of admitted I'm not facing a huge amount of it myself, but I know my friends are, and if you need help contacting these people, I can. But again, it's you want to kind of be backup for the people who are doing the fights, and to let them know you care about what they're doing, that you're going to, if you try to figure out what resources they're sacrificing to do good work, and then back them up. There's one TED Talk that actually kind of changed my life back when TED Talks were still a thing.
Okay.
And it's really simple. This guy showed this video of an outdoor concert and some people lying on a grassy hill watching the concert, and one person gets up and starts dancing. And like it goes on for like a minute, and he's the only person dancing. And then the guy then says, now watch this. And then one other person tells that guy that's awesome and starts dancing too. And once the second person starts dancing, everyone in the crowd felt like they had permission to start dancing too. And all these people start getting up and dancing. And if I don't have the courage or the inventiveness or whatever, or the just being the go-getter like you sometimes on some of the awesome things you're doing, to start something cool, I can be someone who can be backup and say, why hasn't anyone noticed this person is doing something cool? And then just publicly do that role and just say, this is awesome. Please, we should be paying attention. And then just doing whatever I can to help that person keep on doing something cool that I'm glad is making the world better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who was that talk? Do you know or recall?
I can't remember. There's so many of them.
Yeah. No, but that's fantastic that you took something away from that. I mean, I can only hope that anytime that I go to, like you said, give any of these speeches or do that someone will take something away that is profound and memorable. Yeah. Like, I don't even need them to remember who I am, right? Or that there's a connectivity. I mean, I think anytime, and it's the same for you in your art, right? Like, you're getting through to somebody, and that it moves them in a certain way, whether it's just to bring joy or whether you've spoken to them through the characters that you've depicted. And as you know, like seeing superheroes and having that connectivity can be a lifeline for a lot of youth and for adults even too. You know, I definitely have some people that come to mind that is certainly the case. But I'm going to play a little devil's advocate and just say, like, you know, I think you sort of like don't give yourself credit to feel like you're quote unquote qualified to talk on behalf, like at the library, for instance, whereas just because you didn't have that personal experience, I think there's like a scale, right? Of like, okay, I didn't get beat up on the street because I'm Asian, but you've definitely had so many experiences where you absolutely have the empathy to speak on a personal level, but also, you know, the authority as like somebody who, has definitely been in the Asian American community as a leader, as a creator, as so many things. Like, I think you're just saying like, oh, maybe these people would be better suited, but I think you would actually be fabulous at it, by the way. Even though you consider yourself to be like a supporting role, I feel like, like you would be fantastic.
I am very, very good at being the cheerleader for somebody awesome. So I want to make sure that somebody who has the direct experiences is there on the panel before I'm there, and then I want to join them on that panel and be the cheerleader. So I'm going to shout out to somebody, Michi Troto, who's a local, like I think it's the Nebula award-winning science fiction editor, groundbreaking Filipino American inside of science fiction in the United States, and an advocate for kind of everything cool. Like she is one of the local people who I really admire in the Chicago area, who's advancing and talking about issues facing Asian Americans. And I try to do everything I can to do that. And if she has a panel, I can kind of provide context and talk about my friend's experiences, but she can talk about her own experiences, and I can be there to kind of back her up. But I could never say with as much authenticity and direct experience as she has about her experiences. But having me there as just someone to talk about and to kind of like deal with the audience, stuff like that, is helpful. But I want her on the panel more than before I go on. If we're both she's more what she's doing is more important. Me being their backup is a human megaphone amplifier for what she's doing, and I'm proud to take that role.
Yes. Yeah. And you do it so well. So, and it is appreciated. I'm sure she is so grateful to have you in that role, because I certainly would love to have a Jean Ha here in Orlando, Florida, coming to the Capitol with me. Like I need that support all the time. But I will just mildly say, oh yeah, it's kind of like me and the Wonder Woman Historia group. I have no business being up there with you all. And I am so excited to do so and to elevate all of you and to speak about how excited I am for you all sharing the work, and that we'll get to talk together on a panel. Like, that's going to be thrilling for me.
When this comes out, I need to remember to hopefully, if I don't remember to do this, I need to tell Michi Troto to watch this interview. And also, because I'm saying to Michi Troto right now, for whenever you do finally watch this, that, I really appreciate what you do. And I've tried to, when you do mention it, I've tried to like back up your projects, but I'm also, you keep on doing cool stuff. And if you need help from me, never be afraid to ask me to kind of do my bit, because I know you're doing more.
I love that. I love it. I love it. So much gratitude. Yes. And if there is a way to follow her and all of that, we'll link that here in the blog post as well for people, so that they can learn more and be involved. Like, I think one of the things that people don't realize is every small action matters and adds up. Like, even if you're like, well, even if I just did this, would it really make a difference? And my answer to that is absolutely. Every small step is an important one, because otherwise we go backwards, right? Otherwise we stand still or go backwards. And I don't know which one is worse sometimes, right? So it 100%, I think people get so intimidated by, how can I help make a difference? Whatever the cause is that you're involved in. I mean, we're talking about the AAPI experience today. We're talking about what it's been like kind of growing up in this country that is our own. I mean, I was born in Boston, and even just a few weeks ago at the Capitol, I get asked like, where are you from? And okay, well, I meant, where are your parents from, right? And then it's like, and then they're like, and I circle back, and I'm not overly insulted. It's just more exhaustive, right? To to have that like kind of a presumption. And the fact that I was with like a male counterpart who was, also there to support, that sometimes there's just very much like, oh, let me just talk to you because you're the man that's next to this other human. And they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, this is the director of Make Us Visible Florida. So you should actually be talking to her. And, that's happened to me like my whole life, even as a Kung Fu Sifu. I mean, the word Sifu is male, right? And so just always kind of constant battles that you're like small things. They're not major. Like, it's not like someone walked up and punched me in the face, like you said, but there's constant things that you are combating on a daily basis. And you have to kind of know how to navigate that. And that's just like through experience. But anytime you want to come to the Capitol in Florida with me, let me know. But Florida is a scary place to be at. So I don't blame you if you don't want to come here.
there's a project where somebody has asked if I'd be interested in doing it. I'm being put on a short list for something very cool, non-superhero. And it involves, I'll just say right now, it involves the official possibly doing the official biography of a famous Floridian, which means I'd probably end up going to Florida to do research. So if that does happen, yes, I will be part of that. Also, I want to throw in a little lesson I heard recently. I'm a fan of author John Green of The Fault in Our Stars and many other books. And he used to be, when he got out of college, he was a hospital chaplain until it turned out to be too much for him. And he wasn't suited for it. But a piece of advice he got from one of his senior chaplains was, don't just do something, stand there. Which is, don't just busy yourself with activity thinking this is going to help society, but also listen to the people who are dealing with the problems directly and listen to them. Don't just do stuff for what you think they need. Listen to them and find out what they need. And sometimes just simply what they need is for someone to listen to them, just to know someone's listening to them, and just being there to listen to people, being there to walk by their side when they're dealing with problems. This can make a huge difference. And also, before you take action, assuming it's going to help things, listen to the people who are most hurt by the problems, who are dealing with the problems, and listen to what they say will help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So don't just do something, stand there.
Yeah, and back to being a good listener is so key. I think that's definitely overlooked all the time. I'm curious if you get the question a lot, and if so, is it exhaustive to be like, what is it like to be an Asian American in comics? Or what is Asian, AAPI representation in comics like? Is that common?
It's not that common, but I see there's a thing where like, bringing up Jim Lee again. I mean, just before I broke into comics, Jim Lee, who's only a little bit older than me, had become the biggest American comic book artist, like the most popular American comic book artist. So suddenly it became totally normal to assume that Asian American, or very specifically a Korean American man, is a comic book artist. So in my industry, it was totally normal just from that stellar burst of creativity of the first few years of Jim Lee working in the industry. That did not apply, and still does not totally apply to Asian American women in comics. So when I talk about listening, I mean, when I talk to Asian American women who came up at the same time or coming up now through comics, they'll face problems and racism that I never had to face, because it's this whole intersectional thing of being a woman and being Asian means you get treated very, very differently. Where a lot of editors at Marvel and DC and stuff like that mentored me, and I've always been incredibly grateful for all the help and fatherly advice I got through the years from these guys. Mm-hmm. But for women of my talent or greater of that age, especially if they're Asian American, 90% more of the interactions were sexual come-ons. Wow. And then they never got the mentoring I did. Mm-hmm. Which really, I mean, I know how much it hurt their careers by knowing how that I wouldn't have gone nearly as far as I did, especially in the time I did, without all those people telling me how to do it. Right. They had to learn it on their own without someone explaining it to them and helping them. And like I won awards early in my career, which I didn't know how to apply for because my editors did it for me.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah. There's always different challenges, especially as a woman of color and Asian American women, like you said. But want to say it was a few years ago. Maybe you and I were the one that had that conversation. I just talked to Cliff Chang recently, and I asked him, I'm like, oh, there's so many amazing Asian American artists. And I don't know that what the stats are on that, or if it's like, oh no, there are actually a lot of creators. And if I feel like you and I might have touched on this, our very first conversation, about why that might be, because I think the first time you and I met was in San Diego Comic-Con as well, and like it was like you and Jay Lee, and like you guys are sharing a table. I don't know if they just put like the Asian Americans together or that was random, but I was like, wow, it just like occurred to me. Here I am in the middle of one of the biggest cons in the world, and just like in this little alley, and it's like, okay, well, I'm literally sitting next to like two amazing artists, but like, are there a lot of Asian American artists? Is that like, when you look at obviously not the majority is Asian American, but is it very prevalent?
Yeah. There's a lot of incredibly talented, I'm just thinking like, I'm leaning a little towards like the Korean American contingent, especially, but like, sure. Cliff Chang's not Korean American. God, he's a good artist. Jim Lee, Jay Lee, Frank Cho and stuff like that. Though again, you'll notice it tends to skew very, very male, because very much like the teachers in elementary school and high school and middle school asked me, why aren't you doing better? I got encouraged to be a comic book artist by the industry. And for women, most women, I'm trying to think of all women pretty much, like I can't think of like a woman who got as much help and mentoring as I did in the industry.
Mm-hmm. I see. And so then now, knowing that, do people come to you for advice? Because I know you're the type of person that pays everything forward and does and like you're doing the Heroes Project and all of that. Like, how do you see that for this next generation? Has that changed?
Like the big growth area inside of comics right now are things like web comics, mm-hmm. and also the book market comics, like the graphic novels, like Raina Telgemeier, Scholastic, all those type of things. And that's a lot more women-friendly space, or a lot more women editors. That really helps a lot too. Where if you just Google a little bit about the history of being a woman at DC and Marvel 10 years ago, and why these women tend to leave the industry after about 5 years, or leave Marvel and DC after 5 years, it was not easy being a woman editor. It was not easy being a woman writer or a woman artist. But in the new fields, it is easier than it was for that. Though I think they still face a lot of hurdles too that shouldn't be there. Mm. There's also like, I went to college in Detroit, and I went to comic shops there, and it was a majority Black city. So I knew a lot of Black superhero nerds, but there's an underrepresentation of Black talent inside of comics. So beyond just like trying to help Asian Americans, women, but also like trying to do my bit to like, there seems to be kind of a historical legacy that kept black talent from advancing inside the comic book industry. Mm-hmm. So, I try to do my bit to kind of like shout out to everyone that I can when I see like a really great talent of like, who's a little bit different, who doesn't have those advantages that I've had, to do my bit to be the mentor that I got already, to give them that same advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we have to wrap up soon because you have other things to do, things to draw, things to write. But I just wanted to say, from our second conversation, which was like a month or so ago, one of the things that really just keeps jumping out on me, that it's just stuck with me now that I've been reading and rereading things and looking at your work, especially, it's just like how you talked about the white space versus the shading. And I'm just like, it really blew my mind, to be honest, in like how I look at art and how I look at any kind of picture now. I was like, that just really stuck with me. And I just wanted to kind of share that, because I just found it so profoundly different than it had never been explained to me in that way, I think. Yeah.
There's a funny thing that happened where, like, when I was inside of Mexico City, obviously a Spanish-speaking country and stuff like that, a young art student, she was a woman, asked me, like, how do I draw the way I do so confidently when I'm doing shading and stuff like that? Yeah. And I got to say, she actually has a small advantage over the English-speaking artist, because she knows Spanish this, how do you call it, the Spanophone world of art history better than most American artists do, because the two most important artists for teaching me outside of comics were Spaniards. So one of them is an artist named Velázquez, and he taught me a lot about how to use light to paint instead of painting shadows. Like when we imagine drawing and painting as taking a white canvas or a white piece of paper and then we're trying to figure out where we put the shadows. But the important part is, for me, in understanding how to do this, is trying to figure out where not to put the shadows, where to put light. You can, like if you're using oil paint, you can add a white paint on top if you're going to be really do big brushstrokes and stuff like that. But like, here's a Velázquez self-portrait.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if you look at it and try to figure out, I'm going to try to recreate where you put the shadows, it can feel a little bit random, and it doesn't apply in very many situations. But if you look at how he handled where he put the light, suddenly it's a lot easier to understand how he did that. Like, you don't draw the shadows around that lit up eyelid over his eye. You think of the light of the eyelid and then put shadows all around it. And then it's very easy to figure out the shape.
Yeah. Fascinating. I love it. I love it because literally that's like, my art form does not come in the form of me picking up any kind of utensil and then on an open canvas. And I just have such an awe of it. And so I went back also and looked through Historia to try to find all the faces. I can't wait to see you all in person so I can be like, show me all the things so I can absorb it. And just such amazing stuff. And it's just going to be absolutely incredible. But
there's a related concept in martial arts, which I only learned in the last few years because I have friends who are into historical European martial arts and Asian martial arts.
Yeah.
And it's a whole idea of timing, beats, rhythm, and stuff like that. Of like, part of like, or Muhammad Ali, part of winning a fight is not being there when the person's trying to punch you.
Right.
And then once they're off balance after having tried to punch you and you're not there, then you move in and get them while they're off balance. And it's that whole, it's kind of the white space, black space, negative space thing too, but in time.
Okay. I can see that. There you are. We're circling back to the beginning conversation of drawing the education lines to like how we can apply this. See, if I had done art, I'd be better at sparring.
Yeah. I should mention also, I'm not uncoordinated, but I have some of the slowest reaction time physically to surprises of anybody I know.
Oh my gosh. I feel like you're exaggerating, but okay.
I had a teacher tell me I have never seen someone with such bad hand-eye coordination.
Oh gosh, it's terrible.
So it's not like I'm going to trip, but it does mean like I am not great at sports. My older brother had a great reaction time.
Right. No, you know what's funny, and I'm not great at sports either. Like, I know that everyone thinks because I do Kung Fu, I should therefore be athletic. And it is true. Like, a lot of the skills I have transfers to other things, but I am not like a traditional athlete. Like, my husband and I are training to go on this like Machu Picchu hike and everything. And people are like, oh, that'll be so easy for you. You guys do Kung Fu. And I'm like, he'll be fine because he's also a strength trainer and does all things. He's very, very much into doing anything physical. But I'm like, oh no, I don't even like to walk around the block. Like, you don't understand. What? Like, I do Kung Fu. Like, that is my thing that I do, but I don't draw the lines well enough to connect the dots. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use my Kung Fu to do this. And that's not true. I mean, I know I do. I mean, I do it even in my activism, but at the same time, because the big principle that we talk about at Kung Fu is how can we ensure everything you're learning here is applied to your daily life? Like, it means hard work. It's beyond the physicality, but I will just straight up say, like, I don't play any other sport. I do not do anything else that's considered to be athletic, other than the Kung Fu. So it's just kind of funny because I think people assume that about me. And I'm like, no. No.
I will say one nice thing about the stereotypes is I've always been a little bit lanky. And so the stereotype that I know martial arts has probably kept a lot of people from starting fights with me.
There you go. If you can't do it, just pretend, like fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And be a really good runner, right? Just be able to run.
Oh, yeah,
but yes, 100%. Oh my gosh. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And now that we've reconnected and I'll be seeing you soon, we'll probably talk before then. What I've been doing with Gene, just so everyone knows, is literally we hang up and then I make him pick another date that he's going to talk to me. And then he has to remind me about it because lately my brain is mush, and I'm going to blame the legislative session. It's thrown a real wrench in my life, but that's what we've been doing. And he has to remind me, oh, hey, no, we did have a talk, by the way. And I go, oh, we did. I'm usually so good about scheduling. And so I thank you for your patience with me, but also that you agree to keep coming back to have fun conversations. And I'll let you pick the subject next time.
Okay. I'm just going to say also, thank you for reminding me to try to do good things, because as soon as we close this video chat, I'm also going to send an email to Michi Trota, which is spelled like Michigan, and then Trota, and say, hey, my friend Sifu Mimi reminded me maybe I should do something awesome and make the world better, or at least help people who are doing things better. And I am at your service.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. And thank you, Michi, for doing what you do as well. Like I'm excited to hear more about it. So until next time, Gene, we will talk again.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.